Welcome to the Behavior Speak podcast. Now, here's your host, Ben Ryman.
Welcome to another episode of the Behavior Speak podcast. As always, I'm your host, Ben Ryman. On the podcast today, we have an interview that's been long in the making. And today we have Bukky Akinwale. Did I pronounce that right?
You did. Good job.
Oh, thanks. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Excited about this. I found Bukky through social media. I follow the University of North Texas, UNT's behavior analysis page. There's so much good stuff coming out of that school. That's a school I wish I went to. There's just so much goodness there. So much, yeah. And so many cool people that I have on the podcast, and otherwise I haven't. Just come out of that place, really neat. Anyway, someone had shared Bukky's thesis, and I was like, "What is that?" That is cool. And right away I reached out, and it took some time. She was still doing work on the project. And she wanted to finish it off, and then it was just sort of scheduling and so on and so forth. We finally made it happen, but she graduated almost 6 months ago now. But before we get into Bukky, I just want to start by quickly acknowledging that I'm producing this podcast on the lands of the Comox, Homoko, Tla'amin, and Tlehus First Nations, who are one nation before we white settlers came in and separated them into reserves. And there was something cool that was going on. Oh, yeah. Just in terms of kind of not really related. I often try to share about sort of connections I'm making with the local First Nation, but episode I just released today, which with Adrian Bradley. I did that interview last week, and so folks should be up to date on kind of where that's all going. So I'll let you listen to that episode to hear are some of the new developments in my relationship with the Tla'amin people. But in terms of sort of Indigenous learning, it's taken a while because I think and we talk a lot about sort of these systemic issues for sort of Black and Brown and Indigenous folks, and getting into the field and getting noticed, and getting platforms and whatnot. And I've been struggling to find more kind of Indigenous guests that are kind of working in these areas. I know I can count on one hand in the Indigenous behavior analysts that I know in Canada. There's more in the States for sure, and I think a lot of them I just don't know. So if you're out there and you want to share your stuff, reach out to me. But I've been venturing into kind of other areas beyond behavior analysts, beyond behavior analysis on the podcast, just to kind of learn more. And one area I've been kind of diving into is school psych, which has a lot of parallels to the work we do. And there's some really good work being done in the States, I think, around Indigenous school psychology. And so I've got some, at least one, maybe two Indigenous psychologist researchers coming on the podcast.
That's interesting.
Yeah, which I'm really looking forward to learning. I don't know. I know very little about sort of, Indigenous culture, in the lands the white folks call the U.S. I don't know a lot about them in my neck of the woods either, but even less about sort of just as I think we'll touch on today, as is sort of African history is so vast and varied and unique, not just from person to person, but from community to community and country to country and so on. So is Indigenous history. There are so many different tribes and clans and groups of people that, when I die, I still won't know everything by any means, and I won't. And I'm not Indigenous, so I'm never going to know a lot of those things. But anyway, I'm excited to connect with some of these folks and learn. And so this one I'm going to be bringing on, I don't want to say the name because I don't want to ruin it in case it falls apart. But this one I want to bring on that answered my email today, said she's been doing this work and she's going to bring two of her Indigenous grad students on too. So so that's going to be neat. So anyway, I'm really just grateful that the podcast has gotten to a place where I can find cool people that are doing like really unique things from really unique perspectives and worldviews, which is a nice segue into Bukky. Because Bukky's work is cool and really needed, and really, I think it's gonna be a game changer, because it's on so many levels. It's not what you'd think we'd be using ABA for, but it's exactly what we should be using ABA for. So I'll just tell you. I mean, I'm going to read the title of your thesis, and then we'll get into sort of your background, and we'll dive more into it. But just to give people a taste. Hails by Moonlight. I mean, right there, I was, you had me at Moonlight. An exploratory analysis of the effects of a storytelling interview package for youth and elders in historically Black communities. I mean, I've never seen anything like this in our field. I've seen some really awesome social justice work coming out now. Some from some of your mentors. In fact, I had Dr. Pritchett on a couple months ago as well. That episode will be coming out soon. We talked about you a little bit, and so many folks are doing some really amazing stuff with behavior analysis and kind of social justice areas. But this is a completely different thing here, and I was saying to Bukky audience, I'm not a reader. I was saying to Adrian in the interview, actually, I've got that I had this bookshelf here of many books, and really important books in our field, and I think I've read like 2 pages out of each of them. They're a good resource if I need them, but I've never read them cover to cover. Journal articles I try, but I'll often skim through. So an actual thesis, which is often 100 or more pages, I'll never read. But Bukky's thesis, I read every single page, and I couldn't put it down. It was just the coolest thing I've ever read. So grateful that you came on to share your story, and share this story, because I think it's big. Yeah. So before we get into that, maybe just as I always do, just kind of hear a little bit of kind of how you got into ABA in the field, and how kind of your journey.
Okay. So I'd like to first of all say that I am originally Nigerian, West African. I grew up in Nigeria, spent my whole life in Nigeria. And so I'm Nigerian and I'm African, core and true. And from when I was younger, I was always so inquisitive. I always asked why, and my parents would tell me that I was just being rude. And you never ask an adult why, you just do what they tell you. But I always wanted to find the truth, like the stories. I think my grandma, my granddad from my mom's side, they were over me. Whenever I would go to the house, I just wanted to know so much about like the history of the community. Why is the king, we call him, they call him Pope Ham. I always wanted to know why that name, first of all, and why is he the Pope Ham? Why not someone else? Like, I always asked questions and they were so over me, but I've always been intrigued in research and also in stories. I love stories. And when I had the opportunity to come here to do my undergrad, I knew I liked research. So in my head, like the only type of research, because of like my background and what I learned growing up, research was science, and science was biology, chemistry, and physics.
Of course.
My bachelor's degree my first one is in biological chemistry with a minor in biology, because that's science, that's research. And during my last semester, I got the chance to actually like do research and work in a lab. And I was working with a professor from China, and she brought like the magic plant, and we're supposed to find the healing property of this plant. So my job was to make the solution that we were going to run in the machine, and then we get the results and go on from there. And so it was research, it's science. I'm excited. And then I made the solution. I was so intrigued by the plants, and I was more intrigued by the stories and the testimonies of people that have used this plant as a tea to like heal themselves. And then like it would be cool to actually find the healing property and then hopefully use this for greater good. So I made the solution, I put it in the machine, and then they told me I would have to wait for 2 hours in the room with the machine and no one else to wait for the results. I was just in the cold room, day in, day out, waiting for results. I'll make a new solution, the same thing, another solution, same thing. I was like, I know I love research, but this can't be the I want. I was talking to my friend, and she just got into ABA, and she was talking about how amazing it was. And like, since I'm so bored with what I'm doing, then I should try ABA. And I applied to the first place I applied to was ABA Academy, a small autism clinic in Arlington, Texas, and it was run by a lady called Nancy Wagner, and she's been in the field for years as well. And I was telling her about like my undergrad and then coming into aviation. I had no experience. I've never worked with any individual on the autism spectrum. And the first time I met her, she told me like, this is science, this is research. The same way you made your solution, you ran it, you saw the results, and you knew you had to make another solution. That's what we're doing. We have the intervention. We run it with our clients. We see the results. Is there a change? If there's no change, then we go back to the drawing board. And she was like, the great thing about this is like working with the children, working on the team, working together to make our clients' lives better. And I was like, yeah, I think this is what I want to do. And after working there for a few months, I was like, yes, ABA is my heart. ABA is what I want to do for the rest of my life. But it took me like a short period of time to notice that typically I was like not the only, we're only 2 Black employees in a company of, I think, over like 40 people. And it's like, I started to learn like of ABA. I started to see ABA as a white career, but I still wanted to break in and like actually do the work and be good at my work and help my clients. So I thought the best thing that I could do was to learn about ABA. So I went back to get my second bachelor's in applied behavior analysis at UNT. And before I actually applied for my second bachelor's, I met with, I don't know what her title was back then, but it was Dr. Toussaint. I met with her. She asked me why ABA. I told her why ABA, and she asked me what I wanted to use ABA for. And I said, eventually I would like to make ABA accessible to like Black individuals like myself, and hopefully even take it back to Nigeria and build like a clinic that's helping a lot of individuals and hopefully spread it all over Africa. So that was my goal. And then she said, you know what? I think if you talk to Dr. Shala Alai, she'd be the best person to work with. So I met with Shala, and from the first day I was like, yeah, this is the lady I want to work with. And I did my second bachelor's doing that. I met Dr. Preachet. She was a TA for one of my classes, and then applied to the master's and then got my master's. All the while, I was working as an RBT as well. So it was like 6 years of my life in ABA, learning about ABA, and then my bachelor's and then my master's, and then just working in the field for 6 years. And it was amazing. It was one of the most impactful work I had ever done. And I will always be grateful for my time working as an RBT. And I still remember all my clients. I remember their faces. I remember their names. They changed my life. And I'm so grateful. But that's how I got into ABA. That was a long-winded answer. But
that was relatively short compared to some of them. You're on par. You're on par. That's cool. A lot of little tidbits in there that really kind of feed into sort of this project. Just for sake of timeline. So how old were you when you came over from Nigeria?
I was 17.
17. So it was okay. And then Shala, of course. I mean, someday Shala will be on here. When I'm cool enough. Yeah, she's awesome. She's the reason for so many amazing people in our field.
Yeah.
Not to mention herself.
Yeah, and I can strongly say that if Shala wasn't my thesis advisor, I don't think I would have been given the opportunity to actually run this study. And it's all because of Shala.
That's not bad. I'm not surprised. You talked about kind of, being grateful, but also, your time in ABA as if it's ended. What's that about?
I wouldn't say it's ended. I'll say we're taking a break. It's right? A pause. Yeah. It's been like 6 years, 2017 to 2021. Yeah. This is not 2016 actually, but it was a big chunk of my adult life. Yeah. And honestly, if I want to be honest, like the thing that stopped me from ABA was I felt like with one of the last clinics I worked with, there wasn't space for growth in terms of like leadership opportunities for myself. And I was already assisting the BCBA. I was helping make like programs and interventions, and I was in charge of like data collection, and I was basically doing like what I would consider like a senior behavior therapist would be doing, or like
you were doing a job that you should have been promoted to.
Exactly. And I just wasn't given the opportunity, and it was really disappointing. It was really it made me step away from that clinic. And then I tried with another clinic, and I don't know. I guess maybe the next clinic that I tried was like, it has more like branches and more clinics around like Dallas, like too much. It's like, yo, how many clinics do you have? It feels like a corporation.
Yeah.
And it just felt weird. And I was like, I don't think this is for me anymore. And yeah, I just needed something different and something that would give me flexibility and something that would allow me to like stop working. I feel like I never stopped working because I'll come back home, and then sometimes if it's a good day with my clients, I'll ponder on their progress and like everything. But if it's a bad day, like the bad day will follow me till I get back to the clinic, and it just felt like work never stopped, and I needed it to stop.
Yeah, I get it. And you touch on some things that that I've been hearing more about recently in interviews. Adrian and I talked a lot about this, and I've talked to a couple other folks around, the difficulties of being Black and brown in ABA spaces, and in particular, in these kinds of clinics that you're talking about. And what tends to happen is, so the episode that we did was on leadership development and sort of entrepreneurship and those sorts of things. And she talked about how Black folks in particular are have a real strong kind of entrepreneurial sense, and that's because there's a lot of Black folks that have had to kind of start their own ABA companies, because that was the only way they could have sort of a safe space, where they could be treated fairly and they could treat other sort of Black clinicians fairly. And so I'm not surprised at all to hear, that your experiences in clinics were, the same and not cool.
Yeah. But I was grateful like it happened that way, because I don't think I would have, I don't know, I'd have ever like taken the break or like thought of another way to affect change without affecting my mental health. So
Absolutely. No, and you can't, and if you're taking work home mentally, yeah, you got to get out. I'm here. I'm with you. It took me, I'm pushing 50 now, and it took me a long time to, have those kinds of boundaries. And so, if you're able to do that early in the game, you're going to live a long, healthy life. That's a lesson that I think more folks, your age, need to learn. So since you didn't decide to, go start your own ABA business, what are you doing now?
So right now I am a UX researcher.
And what's a UX researcher? What's that even mean?
So UX researcher is basically someone that works on a typically like a UX team. But UX means user experience researcher, and we work with like multiple clients. It could be like a tech company or a health and wellness company or a food company, any company that has a product. I can work with you to basically get our users' feedback, and we have like certain methodologies that we use to get those feedback. It could be like an interview, it could be like a usability study, like a survey, it can be a diary study, even a field study or a focus group. And we just get into the minds of our users to understand their experience, and then we make insights to help better their experience. So it's like we're advocating for the users and also making sure that the business doesn't burn and crash, because the users or the customers are the ones that give your products meaning in life. They have to make sure that they're happy so that you can be happy, your business can be happy.
Right. So you're kind of providing that feedback connection between user and entrepreneur that they would only get otherwise through, Yelp or
Yeah.
or
Like a Reddit thread.
or people returning things, and that sort of thing. Right on. That's cool. And I see there's definitely a lot of data analysis, the stuff you like, doing,
Yeah.
seeing what's happening. And it sounds like, and how long you've been in the UX sort of space then?
I would say since this day I started doing interviews, because that's basically it. So parents interview, client intake. That's why I feel like ABA and UX are there's a big bridge that branches us together, or joins us together, because we're all about the users, and the users can be anything. It could be animal, it can be a child, it can be an adult, like anything. That's our users, and we want to make sure that their experience or their life or their interaction with the environment continues. I would say, like, as long as I'd been in ABA, I've been in UX research, but it did take me some time to learn like the methodologies and to actually see that most of the methodologies, like, they tie back to like ABA. We've used surveys sometimes when you're getting parents' feedback on how their kids are doing. We've done IDIs, like in-depth interviews with our parents to understand what their goals are, what the children need. And then we use those goals, we make research plans, UX researchers and behavior analysts, we make research plans. We then go ahead with the objectives. We use the results to make informed, data-driven decisions, I would say. Yeah.
It's social validity, right? So
yeah.
I mean, that's a big part. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So do you work for a company or do you work independently or?
Yeah, right now I'm working for a company for a period of time, and I'm working with Weight Watchers.
Oh, really cool. So sorry. Maybe you answered my question or maybe I'm confused. So are you working for Weight Watchers doing this kind of research, or are you working for a company doing this research for Weight Watchers?
I'm working with Weight Watchers doing research.
Neat.
Yeah, I just like yesterday I had like 7 interviews, 1 hour long interviews as well. But it's fun, like talking to them and seeing them use the products and just hearing their feedback.
That's really cool. Really cool.
Yeah.
Love that. I did not expect that. See, this is how little I know. I thought UX was universal design. I thought that's what U stood for.
No.
So you completely gave me a completely new answer that I wasn't expecting. That's really cool. I don't think I've even heard of sort of this. I've heard of UX, but I just haven't heard of what it is. I made an assumption that that's what it was. Really neat, fun. No, good. I'm glad you're enjoying that.
Yeah,
okay. Well, let's shift gears back to the paper. So thank you, Shala, for allowing this project to exist.
Yeah.
It's just such a let's just get into it. So maybe start by telling us kind of why you wanted to do this kind of study.
My why.
Yeah. Are you a BCBA supervisor looking to streamline your practice? Or maybe you're working towards your BCBA and need to find the right supervisor. Homehouse offers tools that make supervision so much more enjoyable for both supervisor and supervisee. For supervisors, they offer easy meeting documentation, competency tracking, monthly verification forms, a built-in supervision curriculum, and so much more. For supervisees, Homehouse has a fieldwork tracker with built-in auditing, monthly verification forms, a curriculum, quizzes, and more. If you're looking for a supervisor, they even have a supervision marketplace where you can connect with BCBAs until you find your perfect match, kind of like professional dating. For more information, go to homehouse.com/speak or search Homehouse on Google. If you're planning on collecting continuing education credits for this episode, you'll need to enter the 3 secret words at www.cbiconsultants.com/shop. The first secret word is Moonlight.
It's always been like, I knew that what I didn't want to do like the typical thesis of like maybe doing a replication or working in like the clinic with one of my clients. I wanted to do something else that would impact the African American community in particular. And the reason is, I think I also wrote this like during my positionality in the paper, but I read the book called All God's Children Need Traveling Shoes, I think. That's the title, by Maya Angelou. And first of all, she's a profound writer and she's one of my favorites. But she talks about like her experience of coming back to Ghana or Africa. She got the opportunity to work at the University of Ghana. And she was so excited to come back home. She's been like her family was stolen from this land. She's coming back home to connect with her people. She was excited. She imagined that there would be like celebration, like, yes, our sister is back. But that wasn't the case. Like when she landed, like she said, the individuals like gave more attention to the Caucasian versus her, and she was like no one cared about her, or like her coming home, and it hit me. It was like a moment of realization for myself. It's like, it made me look in the mirror, like, how would I have acted? I wouldn't have even cared about her. I would have probably been more like interested in the Anglo American individual versus her. I wouldn't even have cared to listen to her story. And why is that? Because I don't know about her. I don't know about like the issues that African Americans were facing. I don't know how hard it was for them to acclimate in this country, in a country where they were being told every day that they're less humans and they don't matter. Like, I didn't care about her story. I didn't care about like her, and I would have it would have been acceptable for me to like blame it on like media and like the information that I'm getting, but I didn't do the research. I didn't care, and it was just a wake up call for me. And I had a lot of conversation like with my dad, because I feel like my dad is I would say he's an what's the word? He's not a scholar, but I'll call him like a historian, like a self-taught historian.
Yeah.
And so we had a lot of conversations about like the different issues that African Americans are facing and the things that we don't see and the information that we're being fed by the media and different things. But all in all, it just moved my passion. I read a lot. I watched a lot of documentaries. I listened to speeches. I studied the life of like Malcolm X and Martin Luther King and the activists, Black Panthers. And like, it was like their whole story came to life to me. And a lot of things have been taken from them. Their languages, their foods, the things that they love, the people that they cared for. And I just wanted to preserve their story and also like share the beauty of the African American community.
Wow, that's something. I read this in the paper, but the positionality piece but I didn't make the connection that for you it was you were putting yourself in the shoes of the people not welcoming Maya to Africa, and it's a bit of a tangent here, which I tend to do, but I have a question, and I don't know if you have an answer for this or not, but I've never actually wondered this till this moment. I mean, I think it's lovely that you had that vision to then, okay, I've got to make this connection with African Americans and understand their sort of position and experiences and start learning that. And that's wonderful, and also probably heartbreaking at the same time. I don't know. I don't know a lot about sort of. I read one book. I read the Stamp from the Beginning, Abraham Kendi book, where he talks about kind of the history of not just slavery, but sort of the origins of kind of anti-Black racism in the world. Like it goes all the way back to, well, I mean, it probably goes even further back, but he really focuses kind of on like, I think it's like kind of 15th, 16th century and forwards. And what I had wondered was, and I don't know if you know this, or if your dad ever kind of shared anything about this. We know a lot about sort of the folks being removed and put into slavery, into bondage, and they were put into slavery in Africa, and then eventually, moved around the world, and eventually when folks came over to my side of the world, our side of the world now, they brought them with them, and then there's that whole story. What I've never heard is what effect that had on the African people that those people were stolen from.
Great question.
And to parallel, the reason I asked that is because I've been learning a lot about Indigenous folks in my area, and the residential school experience. School is not a good word, of course, but that's what they call them. Where, and I don't know if you know about these residential boarding schools. They're in the States too. It's worth looking up, but essentially, this thing called the Indian Act went into place in Canada, and the purpose of the Indian Act was essentially to regulate these people, and that's how they got into the reserves first. So they got torn from their lands and put into these sort of reserves, to be sort of segregated, as it were, and that was sort of step one. And then there was a lot of sort of, I think brutal things that kind of happened. I think around the 1800s, we opened up the government of Canada, along with the Catholic Church and a couple other sort of denominations of Christianity, opened up these residential schools. And the idea was they were going to take all of the children, all the Indigenous children from all of the families all over North America, and put them into these schools and assimilate them into white culture. And so they shaved all their heads, cut off all the braids, made them wear, westernized clothing. They weren't allowed to speak their own languages. They weren't allowed to do their own ceremonies. They weren't allowed to, any of that. They all become Christians. And they were severely abused and experimented on. And there was a story that, and you can look this up, called the Kamloops, Kamloops residential school. This hit the news about a year after the George Floyd murder, almost to the date, that at the Kamloops residential school, they had discovered, using a method called ground penetrating radar, and they discovered the graves of 215 children buried on the property. And Indigenous folks have known this for years, and we kind of colonizers have really ignored this forever. And that number has gone up to, I think it's over 10,000 now that they've found, not just at Kamloops, but in residential schools across the country and in the U.S. And I'm sure those numbers are going to go higher and higher, because there's so many of these places now that are starting to get funding or help to do these sorts of scans. But basically and so I say all that because that is sort of the foundation of intergenerational trauma for Indigenous people, and about literally losing generations of people were taken, because some of these kids were born and died in these schools, so they never went back home. And there's a whole history there that could spend a few episodes on. But so I've heard about sort of, I understand more. I understand. I understand from what this trauma means, because these generations are really ripped away, and what that's created. And still to this day, there's still, effects of these, and this is actually still happening. So this is actually, we don't have residential schools anymore, but the foster care system has essentially taken over the residential school system. And so we pull Indigenous kids out of their families and put them into white families. There was a thing called the 60s scoop in the 1960s, sort of after the residential schools closed. These kids were ripped from their families and put in foster homes all over North America. So they'd be like a kid from, a northern Canada, reserve that got pulled from their family and got adopted into a family in like Minnesota or Missouri or whatever, never to have connections again with their families. So that was the 60s scoop. And now that's moved into sort of the foster care system, where much like the stories I hear about, Black kids in schools, about the disproportionality of Black kids in getting disciplined. There's this disproportionality of Indigenous children in foster care. And there's a real push now for, governments to start funneling sort of, what am I trying to say, sort of, funding for children's services back into Indigenous communities so they can care for these kids instead of, because it takes away all their culture and all this stuff. So you have this whole, I'm sorry you didn't know a lot of this. I'm so this is a bit of a blast for you, but so there's an obvious effect on Indigenous families today as a result. That's why I ask, in Africa, when these literal generations of people were ripped from these families. Now, again, this was, a few hundred years ago, but we know from the Indigenous stories that carries over. What I'm curious, do you know about sort of what the effects have been on African families?
Absolutely. I feel like there's a misconception that during slavery, the colonizers came, they took they stole people and then went back to like England or stayed on stolen lands like Americas.
Yeah.
And they just left Africa.
Right.
They never left. They were still there, making people be less than humans. Like, of course, never compare what the African Americans, they went through trauma, they went through abuse, like on a scale that nobody can ever know, like the extent. But there was abuse and mistreatment or maltreatment on the continent till this day. Like, there's still white-owned corporations that run countries, that run resources. Congo is one of the richest countries, if we're talking about in terms of resources and the amount of natural minerals and metals. There's no place richer than Congo, but it's one of the poorest countries. And corporations like Apple, they get their whatever they need to make all the devices that I'm using, that we're all using. They get it from Congo. They're using children slaves to dig up mines and find those things. But they never left. Their claws are still deep into Africa, and I don't think it will ever be taken away from Africa because, unfortunately, my dad always said, like, the white man, like, he would say, like, the white man is wicked, but he's really, really smart because he didn't make a war on, like, your physical body, but they made a war on your mind. You're less than human. I'm the standard. I am who you should be looking up to. I have the light skin. This is the you should want. The accent. This is the accent you should want. If you talk in a different accent, that means you're less than me. If you eat something different than me, you're less than me. If you dress in a different way, you're less than me. So the white man and the white man became the standard. And it's still the standard. It's affected, it's deep into the veins. Like, I don't think we can ever, like, understand the extent to which, like, the white man made a war on the mind. That was so intelligent. Like, that's brilliant. As hard as it might be to say, well, it's brilliant. Making a war on the mind and, like, if generations to come, like, there's still individuals that believe, like, that's the standard, and it became like a war between your countrymen. I want to be close to the white corporation, so that I will get the benefits of the white corporation, and you can be, like, away from us. And, like, there are people that look like you, sound like you, but look down at you because of proximity with, like, the white corporations. And even down to, there's something called the Declaration of Amalgamation in Nigeria. So Nigeria was split into 3 zones. If you open the map of Nigeria, like, the half of it is for the Northerners, or, like, the Hausas, and then the rest is for Igbo and Yoruba. So they made 3 major, like, tribes, but they're hundreds of tribes in Nigeria, but we have 3 major ones. And like from the way it was split up, why is one tribe getting half of Nigeria? Is because of proximity with the white people. The cultures works better with like the colonizers, so they were favored.
Right.
It's deep, and it's sad, but like that's the truth. Like it's still there. Yeah.
So really, the the day that the ship left with the slaves, the locals were still enslaved.
Yep.
So it didn't even really have a chance to probably even notice.
No.
In some ways, yeah.
No, they were still enslaved. Like it's just crazy.
Yeah.
It was a crazy time. And then like the thing it moved from colonizers to I'm here to teach you stuff, and then stealing people, and then it then moves to like mission. I'm a missionary. Listen to me. I'm here to save your soul. Forget about your culture and act this way because like you're saved. And I don't know. It's just a weird human experience, I guess. I don't know. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Well, let's kind of shift back a bit to the positionality piece and sort of how you started learning about African Americans being in Africa.
Yeah.
And how that kind of informed doing this work.
Yeah. So like I said, I had an interest, and I knew that I wanted my projects to be something that positively affected like the African American community. Like definitely not as a whole, but like the little community members that was able to benefit, or not even benefits, but their stories were highlighted. And I think I don't know how I explained this idea to Shala, but Shala understood, and then she gave me a book called White Lilacs, and it's like a fictional account of Quakertown. So it talks about like following the Emancipation Proclamation. Like there was an African American town. I think in the book it was called Freedom Town.
Yes,
I don't know.
Freedom Town. I remember that. Yeah.
And like their stories and how they were displaced because they wanted to make a park, yada yada. And she was like, this was actually a true story, and that piqued my interest. And Shala has an amazing relationship with like the Southeast Denton community, especially the Martin Luther King Jr. community. So this day, like this free tutoring that happens on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and that Shala organized. She's amazing. But we already know that. But she had a strong connection with them, or strong relationship with them. And she gave me the book, and the book intrigued me. I did more research on Quakertown, and by that time I was already working as a tutor in the MLK Center as well. And I just knew like this was my project. This is my passion. I want to learn their stories, and get people to talk about their stories, because I could not understand how like I think talking to the director at MLK, I asked her if there was like a curriculum that covered Quakertown and what happened like in high school or something.
Sure.
And there was nothing like that. And that was weird to me because like it happened in Southeast Denton, at least to mention it. But there's a park that is called Quakertown Park, and also like there's a museum, I guess, if you want to learn about it, but they never taught them in school. And I thought it was important to at least know about your community, know about the land you're staying on and what happened with that land. And being a daughter of Africa and having I haven't experienced so much when it came to oral storytelling and all the stories my mother told me and her mother told me and my dad told me. Like all of those things are still in me, and I hope to tell my children to one day. So I just thought it would be perfect to at least have that connection happen between like the elders and the children. And it also, when I was younger, there was a program called Tales by Moonlight. I will come on like I think it was every other day or every Sunday. I don't remember, but like it had a tune. And when I did my thesis defense and my parents saw the title of my thesis, they were singing the tune too, because everyone knows Tales by Moonlight. And it was really cool. My auntie called me. I was like, what? You did Tales by Moonlight? That's so cool. But yeah, it was a program that would come on. There would be an elder. She would sit in the circle surrounded by children. And then she would tell them like a story that had like a lesson. And then they would ask questions. And that was what would happen. But as she told the story, it would be like actors on the screen, like acting out that story and having that conversation. It was an amazing program. So I took that idea, I took White Lilacs, I took my love for history and my desire to help the African American community, and it became this, my thesis.
Cool. What is it about sort of, Quakertown and Southeast Denton that because you compare, and maybe I misread this, but I thought maybe you were comparing Freedom Town, but you were comparing those stories to things like the Seneca Village and this Greenwood district in Tulsa.
Yeah.
What's that relationship?
It was fascinating to me, like learning about Quakertown and how it wasn't public knowledge that this was a town that existed in Southeast Denton and then they were displaced. I felt like this story was something that it should be like the backbone of Denton. Like, this is what happened on this land and this is the land you're on. I felt like it was a story that needed to be told. So I was confused when like it wasn't being told and most people didn't know what Quakertown was. And during my research, and the displacement of Quakertown happened around the 1800s, and learning about like Quakertown and the displacement, you know how like once you're researching something, more things pop up and more things pop up. And I think in one of the articles I was reading, they're talking about Seneca Village, Central Park. And I was like, what? Central Park? Seneca Village? And it was all around that same time, 1800, Seneca Village displaced so that another park could be made. And then like the Tulsa massacre as well, happening all around the same period. And I don't know, if three major events happened that affected the Black community in such a huge way, I thought it was important, like that, for that story to at least be told and for people to know about what happened to those African American communities. And yeah, I just didn't understand why the story wasn't out there.
Right. So I feel like displaced is such a mild term. So Quakertown was a Black community, a thriving Black community. It sounds like as was the Seneca Village and this Greenwood district. And then what happened? So is it that the white folks came and said, we want this land for something else, so you guys got to go, essentially?
So essentially, from what Miss Alma Clark told me, because her husband grew up in Quakertown and he was there when it was displaced, and then he left for a long time because it was just too painful for him, and like watching his parents like go through that was really hard. But what she told me was that Quakertown was like right in I think the present day square, like Denton Square, like downtown Denton, I guess. And it was right next to, it's currently known as TWU, Texas Women University.
Okay.
It was back then, I don't know what the name, I know what the name is, but I just don't remember off the top of my head. It was a different name. It was a female university. Yeah. And the only reason was that it was too close to the university, and the students had to walk past Quakertown. God forbid they have to walk past a group of Black individuals enjoying resting in their homes. Like they had to walk past to get to like the white community location. And the community thought it wasn't safe, and they wanted to keep their women safe because God forbid they have to walk past a group of Black people living in the houses. So they were forced, they gave them no choice. They said, we're going to pay you for your land, and they paid them little to nothing, gave them no choice. A lot of people tried to fight and go to court, but who's going to defend that community against the dominant community? So they had no choice. They took the money. I think one woman refused to leave her house. Like truthfully, she refused to leave the house. She did not pack up, and so they literally picked up the house with her inside and took her to the ground. And the worst part was like the land that they were giving them was like the shit hole of Denton. It was where they were dumping like sewage. They had like farmlands all around. So imagine like it was horrible. And they had no choice. Yeah. So that was it. But I think they gave them like a different reason. I don't know why. I think the reason that they gave was like they wanted to make a park.
Sure.
Yeah.
And so without, telling the whole history of Seneca Village, that one just blew my mind, the Central Park, which is, probably the most well-known park on the planet, was created by displacing a thriving Black community and kicking them out.
Yeah. And this time it was like a mixture of like majority African Americans and like some Europeans. But like the Europeans that lived in Seneca Village were like the ones that had to do like the hard work. They weren't rich people.
They were the working class or lower class or whatever.
Exactly. Yeah.
Wow. Okay, so you definitely wanted to sort of dig into the history of Quakertown and start kind of bringing it back into history because it was kind of erased, unerasing it, if that's a word. And so before we kind of dig into the nuts and bolts, I just want to talk a little bit more about storytelling itself and kind of why storytelling is so important to the Black community. What's the reason for that?
I'll say like storytelling is one of the main forms of preserving history for most indigenous tribes and like also marginalized communities and groups. So not just African Americans, even Native Americans and like indigenous people in Canada as well. Like everywhere that there's an indigenous tribe, storytelling is the one thing that they use. One of the main things that they use to preserve that history. And it was almost seen as a ritual that brought people together. I would tell you every December when I was younger, every December we would go to the village. And we would stay with my grandma, and every night we were all required to sit outside with our lanterns, just one, and we would stare out into space, look at the stars, and my grandma would tell us about the stars. She would tell us about like the different stories. It was ingrained. This wasn't just happening in my grandfather's house. It was happening in my cousin's house. It was happening it was like a ritual that everyone did. So, and it's true for I want to say, just to be safe, because I don't know the numbers, but most indigenous tribes, storytelling is the one thing that they use to pass down the folk tales, pass
For
down
sure.
the history. And African Americans being ripped from their homes to a new land.
Behavior Analysts. Lake Ridge Community Support Services is offering a live online training in the AIM curriculum on June 19th and 20th. Participate live with the author of AIM, Dr. Mark Dixon, as you are learning about ACT in AIM. Get questions answered and be part of a dynamic learning environment. Move between larger workshop-style training and small breakout groups where you will work together and build and practice ACT lessons. You will have conversations on the successes and challenges of implementing AIM at an individual, classroom, and entire school levels. Participants can earn 12 BACB learning CEUs, plus you'll get 30% off the AIM curriculum book with your purchase. There are only 30 seats available, so act now. Click on the link in the show notes to register or go to www.lrcss.com/events and click on AIM training on their June calendar. The second secret word is Alma.
Storytelling was the only thing they had to preserve, like that, their true identity, especially for their identity. When they were being told, you can't speak your language, you can't act the way you act, you can't dance the way you want to dance, you can't sing those songs, you have to do what we tell you to do. They were being repressed, their identities were being erased. Storytelling was the only thing that was passed down from generation to generation to help preserve at least something from their identity. And yeah, I think I answered your question.
You totally did. And the Indigenous connection kind of follows into my next question, because definitely the learning that I've done about sort of Indigenous communities, it's all storytelling, absolutely. And I know that sort of both from your thesis and then also from some of the Indigenous histories, certainly in terms of slavery, language was taken away, writing was taken away, storytelling, literally kept some people alive during slavery. And it was the only way to sort of stay sane in a, in a nonstop living hell. And similarly for Indigenous folks, and you can't, I always would hear, about, how we took everything away from the Indigenous people, but we could never take away their stories. Those were there. No matter what you do to us, the stories will still be there. And some of them are becoming lost because the actual languages are disappearing. And there's so many Indigenous languages, but there's something else that I didn't know, and I'm not surprised from everything you've said, was a lot of the terms that I've only heard in sort of with Indigenous groups, because I've really only gotten to know the Black community through this podcast, is words like aunties and elders. Which are also terms that you hear a lot in sort of the Indigenous communities. And so maybe just a little bit about sort of what elders are in the Black community, and particularly, elder women and their value.
Yeah, absolutely. And like, if you go on YouTube and you type in, like, let's say old school Nigerian movie, I can bet you like $20 there would be a guy there or a group of people called the elders, and they're there to like help the Igwe, the king, make decisions and to make sure like the community is safe.
Right.
And that's very true. Like, an elder isn't just someone that in most like Nigerian communities, an elder isn't just someone that's older, but it's someone that is looked up to pass down wisdom to the youth, and to also help the king like make sure that the community or the kingdom is being ran smoothly. So in most African communities, we have elders. I call a lot of people my auntie, and they're not my mom's sister, but
Right.
it's a term of respect as well, because
Yes.
you are not allowed to call. I would, oh my God, I would never ever look at an older person and call them by their first name. That is just disrespectful. I do not have the right. I have not gone through. I think there's also a video of Maya Angelou, and she was talking. A young person was asking her a story, and she called her Maya, and she was like with all due respect, you don't have the right to call me by my first name because you don't know my experiences. So, and it's a true thing for African communities. You don't go around calling people by their first. I don't even know what my grandma's first name is or my first name is.
Wow.
To think hard to remember, but I did not, and I do not have the right to call them by their first name. I'm not their peer. I haven't gone through what they've gone through. I haven't seen what they've seen. And there's a quote or a proverb that my parents will tell me till this day. They tell me, Bukky, what I see sitting down, you can't see even if you climb the top of Mount Kilimanjaro, or like the tallest mountain, you would never see it. And it's all about the wisdom and the experience. And those experiences and that wisdom earns them the right to not have to be called their first name by a young person, because I don't have that experience, that wisdom either. So there are a lot of titles, a lot of people I call uncle, or a lot of people I call daddy, like, oh, hi daddy, hi sir, hi ma, hi auntie, hi uncle, like all those terms, or grandma. I don't have the right to call them by their first name. And I think it's true for most tight-knit African communities, and also I think for most African Americans as well, and even indigenous individuals. Yeah.
And that's cool.
It tripped me when Shala was like, call me Shala. I was like, no.
No, never doing that. And so so for someone like Shala, what would you call her?
Dr. Shala.
You just call doc, but you'd say her first name, but you'd put doctor before it?
Yes, because she told me she told me it's all right. She said that was okay. And being in the States now for 10 years, like, I have learned that it's normal. Yeah, a lot of like professors, at first it was very uncomfortable for me to call them by their name. I'd always say yes sir, yes ma, like, because it's respectful. You're a professor. You spent so many years like learning that wisdom and that knowledge. I don't have the right, but it took me not a long time, but a short time to realize that it's the norm in this end of the
world
to call people by their first name.
And what about, just one more kind of question about all the aunties? So you've got like 10 aunties in a room. How do they know who you're talking to?
I'll walk up to them.
Okay. So you're not hollering.
No.
Yeah, waiting for one to answer. Gotcha. Very good. Okay, so one of the reasons I asked who are elders, because that plays a role in this study. So what was, so we know now you wanted to kind of bring back the history of Quakertown to sort of Southeast Denton in some way, or to at least some people there, and help that community learn. So how'd you do that?
How did I do that? First of all, like, Shala was major in this. Like, Shala paved the way for this. And like, I rode off of her relationship and the trust the community had in her. And like the trust they had in her, like in Dr. Shala, that made the path easy. And also, like, I had some form of relationship with the director of MLK.
Right.
She had seen me, we've had conversations, and she Miss Shalon Brown, a major force as well in this study. She helped me contact Miss Alma Clark, and I also wrote off of her trust and her reputation as well. That made it easy for me as well. So Shala and Miss Shalon, they helped me a lot in this project, and they gave me the opportunity, and they also gave me the space and their names and their honors as well. So that was what gave me like the space to actually run this project. Without Shala or Miss Shalon, it would have been possible. So yeah, shout out to them.
So Miss Alma Clark is, for this study, is the elder.
She is the elder.
Right.
And she just turned 95 last month.
Wow. Awesome.
I know.
So she definitely has got the stories.
Yeah.
And so in this study, you're essentially wanting to pull out her stories.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so who did you want her to tell the stories to?
I wanted her to tell the stories to the youths, the Southeast Denton youths. And the first participant was someone that I had interacted with. Now I say we have more of a relationship. She's my baby. Yeah. But we've interacted. We've been in the same space, like doing tutoring.
Yeah.
She was present. She's Miss Shalon's niece. So she was present, always present. And we had that relationship as well. So she was my first participant. She was the first person that said, hell yeah, I want to do this, Miss Bukky. So she was the first person. And then, honestly, the second participant, because I had no idea how to recruit my second participant, but it was definitely word of mouth. And the next day that I was with my participant, Chevelle, her friend came in and she was like, what are you guys doing? I want to do it too. And that was my second participant, Maliyha. And the third day, or the second day of working with Maliyha, there were like a group of 5 kids that showed up too, and were like, what are you guys doing?
Oh my gosh.
Do it too. So it was very word of mouth. And it's like the numbers just kept increasing and increasing. So it was really cool. Yeah.
That's awesome. So primarily this study was just the two of them, right?
Just the two of them.
2 girls.
Yes.
And sorry, how old were they? Or are they? Sorry, they're still around. Yeah.
Chevelle is 8 years old, and I think Maliyha is, I think she's 8 or 9. I don't remember.
Oh my gosh! So just youngins, really your babies. And so you're essentially using a couple of kind of ABA procedures, I guess.
Yes.
To teach these kids how to listen to a story, or how to request a story. What was the goal there?
The goal was to teach them interview skills that we hoped would even carry on to other aspects of their lives, and give them better confidence, but interview skills to ask for stories, to listen to those stories, and to understand what those stories are and why they're important. Yeah. And so we also had to teach them what it means to be respectful to an elder, what's expected of them, and listening skills, like nonverbal ways to show that you're listening. So like nodding when the elder was talking, or making like gestures, or sighing, or making sounds, like just to show the elder that you're listening to what the elder is saying. And I would say that them being African American girls, they were very respectful. I didn't have to teach them to be respectful because their parents already taught them how to be respectful. Yeah. So they would sit straight when she's talking to them, and they would give her their full attention. So it was amazing because they already had those skills. So I was just there to remind them to use those skills.
I think you might have already touched on this, but after everything you've kind of told me about sort of the Black community and about, about, storytelling in the Black community and so on and so forth,
Mhm.
I guess, why do these kids need to learn this from you? Isn't this something they might already be doing, or?
Yeah, great question. I would say because although they already had those skills, we wanted to make sure that like they understood why those skills were important and why we needed them to have like to we needed them to make those skills present during the interviews and
Mm,
why it's important. Like we had a whole lesson on who an elder is, like the importance of the elder and like the importance of story. We wanted
mm,
them to you have the skills great, but like the stories she's telling you, they're the gold. They're the things that we want you to pay
mm,
attention to.
mm,
Usually to form that intergenerational bond and to also have them carry it along to other people in their lives. And I would say, I was going to save this to the end, but like it did carry on to other people in their lives.
mm.
They would go back home from dinner and Miss Shalon was telling me like Miss Chevelle would be lecturing her on Quakertown and what Miss Alma Clark said and like
Nice.
different stories of like the refrigerators back then having to get the ice and straightening. Like they remember those stories and they remember the experiences and like the painful story of Quakertown. They did remember, especially when Miss Alma Clark was talking about like the painful experiences like the residents of Quakertown had, or the residents had, they paid attention to that as well, and they made connections to other things that unfortunately they have seen and have seen like the adults in their lives experience. Like Chevelle made the connection of Miss Alma Clark being forced to sit at the back of the bus. She was like, "Oh, that reminds me of Rosa Parks. I've heard
Mm,
it before." And yeah, and it was like, yeah, and like they made the connection to like yeah, she told us of how hard it was to be like Black or African American back then, but like
mm.
it's still true till this day.
Wow, that's
Yeah.
cool. We'll circle back around to kind of what the kids are doing these days, but
Mhm.
um, so this is kind of an ABA podcast sometimes. So let's talk a bit about that piece. So I don't want to get into sort of the verbal behavior analysis you did, which was very good, and folks can certainly reach out to you if they want to read that. But I think you did a nice sort of VB analysis of sort of
Oh,
speaker and listener behavior and all that stuff. That stuff's a bit.
it was hard.
I bet you it was hard. It looks like it was
Yeah.
hard, but I think you did a really good job of sort of laying that out and kind of using Skinner's analysis and all and that kind of piece um, to sort of basically you're and these are just things you do in a thesis. I mean, this is probably not
Mhm.
things you would do normally if you're just teaching kids to sort of listen to elders. You wouldn't go sit down
Yeah.
and do a VB analysis of what listening and responding is. But this is more for you getting a graduate degree and
Yeah.
understanding the conceptual basis of that stuff. And so I
Yeah.
get that. But I do want to hear a little bit about the procedure, the ABA procedures that you used to teach the kids, and kind of what that looked like.
Yeah. So we use teaching interaction procedures, so TIP.
Mm,
And TIP typically has like 6 steps. Like first, um, stating what the behavior is, breaking down the behavior, then the teacher modeling what that behavior is, and then the learners discriminating between like an appropriate and inappropriate one, and then providing feedback. So that was like the basics of it, and then we
mm,
use that to teach each of our skills. So sorry, I need a refresher. There was listening, there was respect, and there was it wasn't I don't think I called it retention, but
mm.
basically retention or
Yeah,
recall.
yeah,
Yeah, so
yeah.
we had those um three skills, and then with each skill it was the same like flow TIP, what the behavior is. Yes,
Mm,
and then I showed like a wonderful, wonderful kid that is really close to me. I call him my nephew, even though he's not, but my nephew Timmy, he was my model. And we recorded like him and his mom actually, they helped me show like good listening behavior and like bad listening behavior and like respect. And that's what we use. And the kids were able to like discriminate between like what makes it appropriate and what makes them inappropriate. And then we would practice and practice until like they got a score of at least 80% before we moved on to the next skill.
Gotcha.
Yeah, so TIP.
And that TIP, that's the Autism Partnership folks, right? That's like Justin Leaf and those folks.
Yes.
Right. And that sounds a whole lot like BST.
Yeah. But like what's the difference between BST and TIP is I guess like with BST they don't have to discriminate between like an appropriate and inappropriate. That's why I did mention BST in my like in my paper.
Yeah.
Like BST and TIP, they have like the same components, but TIP has the one piece like discriminating. So that's what we used.
Oh, this reminds me of, because I think Leaf and colleagues have a paper, the Cool or Not Cool paper, I think. Do you know that one? And that's, I think, well, I haven't read it, so I don't want to butcher it, but I think that's that discrimination piece. So, you know, this behavior is cool, this behavior isn't so cool.
Yeah.
And you know, if you engage in the cool behavior, you know, good things. If you engage in the not so cool behavior, maybe not good things. I think that's sort of the gist of that paper. And, you know, guys, I'm sorry, I haven't read it, so forgive me if I've butchered that. But just by you saying that discrimination piece, that cool, not cool thing makes more sense to me contextually. Okay. So what were the skills were basically listen to the story. Was say respectful was the next one, or
respect?
Like so be respectful. While listening, and then basically recalling the story so you could talk about it after.
Yes.
Sort of basically. So Elder Alma tells them a story about Quakertown. They sit there and use appropriate nod and ask questions back, clarifying questions, that sort of thing. And then later on, you go ask them, what did you learn about Quakertown?
Exactly. Yeah.
Right. And so how did it go?
It went beautiful, honestly. Like, I can't stress how wonderful it went. And I think with kids, you don't want to, I had like in-depth interviews with IDIs, again, UX research, but in-depth interviews with Alma Clark. And we spent like hours talking about like her story and going really into the nooks and crannies. But with the girls, I know kids sitting still for 10 minutes, like you're asking for too much already.
Yeah.
And elders have elders and like older individuals, especially older like African Americans or African individuals, when they're telling stories, they can go really in depth, and sometimes they forget about the time. Like when I call my mom, she will spend like 30 minutes on one story, and she just keeps going on and on and on. But at least I have the attention to sit there and listen to her. Like, to ask that of a kid is like asking for too much. So for each of the interviews, it typically took, and I think Miss Alma Clark was also aware of that. So she wouldn't go too in depth, which is really nice of her, because she knew like kids, they're itching to stand up. But it took about like 15 to 20 minutes to interview her and like her story. And they had like a couple of questions, which was like, tell me about yourself. And Miss Alma Clark would tell them about themselves. And I don't remember, but she talks about Miss Alma Clark, and she talks about like, before she talks about Quakertown, they talks about like, because she spent a lot of time talking about like, tell me about yourself. Tell me how it was growing up when you did. and then tell me about Quakertown, and then tell me why Quakertown is important, something like that. So, like those questions, like 5 questions in total, and it took like 20 minutes, and Miss Alma Clark would tell them like their stories, and if they had any follow-up questions, they would ask her as she went. And Miss Alma Clark, being amazing as she is, like right after they're done with the interview and the kids started the interviews by introducing themselves, thanking for the time, and at the end they would thank her as well, and like say something that they learned from the story, like, oh, thank you so much about telling me about how it was when you grew up in Austin, Texas, something like that, and thank you for your time. And once they were done, she was like, all right, tell me what you learned. What was cool for you today? And then you'll have to tell her something as well, which was cool.
Oh, that's awesome.
But that's how it typically went. 20 minutes questions. Yeah.
Yeah, and I read the stories and sort of the recall, and it was interesting that some of the stuff the kids recalled was the same, like I met your name and where how old you are, that sort of stuff. But then other details were quite different, and so that was cool that they kind of both had they both got different experiences from chatting with Alma.
Yeah,
Alma didn't tell the exact same story to each kid.
Yeah, which was amazing too, and like I think with Maliyha, one of the kids, like her experience with Miss Alma Clark, I think was more personal based on the things that were happening in her life as well. So she remembered like most of the personal stories of Miss Alma Clark, of like her husband, and like her husband being like from Quaker, like it was really personal for her. Versus Chevelle was very like, she wanted the full view, like the historical part of it, like what was happening, why she had to sit at the back of the bus, and why did she have to sit upstairs in the theater instead of downstairs where everyone, like where the white individuals were. So
Maliyha had some really good questions back to Alma that weren't part of the original story.
Yeah.
Right on. Really cool. So okay, so it sounds like success for sure. So back to sort of the generalization piece. So you said some of the stuff continued. What did what did that look like?
I'm sorry, when you say some of the things, continue to other aspects of their life.
Yeah.
Yes. So like on the dinner table, Chevelle was present for my thesis defense.
Nice.
Crazy, but she was there
awesome.
with Miss Shalon, and Shalon was talking about like Chevelle went back home that night, and she was like, yeah, this is what happened to Miss Alma Clark. Miss Alma Clark said that in Austin, she had to sit at the back of the bus, and like she asked a lot of questions from her grandma, like, what was your experience? Did you have to sit at the back of the bus?
Oh my gosh, that's awesome.
Yeah, like the differences with like I think she was mind blown by the fridge and them having to put like the ice fridge. It was mind blowing to her, and she was like, they had different fridges back then as well, and her husband was from Quakertown, and Maliyha as well. Maliyha would go home and talk her mother's ear off about Quakertown, Clark, and she just said it was the coolest thing. Like till this day, Maliyha's mom will always tell me about how like cool that period was for Maliyha, which I'm so grateful for.
Yeah.
And also like the confidence she has like with school and like reading as well, like it got better, like those skills, because she was really shy, and sometimes like when reading like the questions, she would stumble on her words, but with practice, like she got more confident, and that carried on to like school life, and also with her interaction with like her friends. It was like a cool thing for her and Chevelle to share the experience of Miss Alma Clark together. Like, yes, we're interviewing Miss Alma Clark. She's a 94-year-old woman. She was from Quaker. It was a cool thing for them to brag about. So yeah, but it carried on in different ways, which was really cool.
That is really cool. I really want to see Maliyha and Chevelle in 10 years and
I know,
and see where they're at and what they're doing, because this would be a game changer.
Yeah.
Do you know, do they see Miss Alma ever anymore, or?
Yes, after I graduated, we went to the Quakertown. I and Miss Alma Clark separately went to the Quakertown Museum, and when everyone saw, it was so cool. When everyone saw her, they were like, "Miss Alma Clark! Oh my God, this is so cool! You're a walking legend!" And people were taking pictures of
Oh
her,
my
and but
gosh,
like,
that's
this is Alma
awesome.
Clark. Like her husband's pictures on the wall here in the museums. It was really cool. And we grabbed lunch. We went over to the Quakertown Park as well. We
Mm,
went back to her house, and I saw like the pictures like from Quakertown. She showed me like I don't know if I added that in my appendix, but like
mm,
there was a notebook from a teacher from Quakertown and like amazing stuff that she showed me. And we had a lunch in her house, and then I left. I still call her sometimes to check on her. And then I took the girls to Quakertown Museum. And then another day we went to Miss Alma Clark's house, and like there's a video on my phone. She was showing them one of the lanterns she has from the 1800s, and they were trying to
mm.
light it together. And they're like, "Oh my God." Like it was a really cool experience, like watching them bond outside. And the last time I saw them, they were like, when was the last time you saw Miss Alma Clark? And I was like, oh, I was going to see her for her birthday. And they were like, oh, without us. So yeah, a whole thing. Now I have to make it a point to remember, like every couple of months. It's been a couple of months since they last saw her. And
Mm.
like Chevelle texts me and was like, Miss Bukky, when's the next time we're seeing Miss Alma Clark? And I'm like, I don't
Oh,
know. We'll make the time.
yeah, absolutely. You
Yeah.
got to. You got to. And I'm hoping we talked about this sort of before we press record. I'm hoping we'll try to maybe share some of those photos and
Yeah.
maybe some of the videos, because that stuff is, when you hear the stories that you're hearing today, folks, and then see these pictures, it's just gonna bring it all together. They're just appendices and theses are usually pretty dull. You got consent forms, and you got some graphs which are kind of nice. You got data collection sheets and so on and so forth.
Mhm.
This was the best appendices ever. With pictures of Quakertown and Alma and the kids and sitting with her and the videos. It's just
Yeah.
so lovely.
And
I'm
I want to point out that it was Shala's idea as well, because I had all the pictures, and I knew I was going to Baba, and I presented the pictures in Baba, and they also watched the videos. And
Oh my
there were a lot
gosh.
of people with like teary-eyed individuals coming to me
Uh,
and talking about how amazing, like just watching that, like the elder and the young
mm,
child, and the child giving the elder her full attention and listening to those
yes.
stories. Like it was such a beautiful thing to witness, especially for the
Mm,
African Americans that were in the crowd that day. And
sure.
it was one of the best. I was in awe because I was nervous. I felt unworthy because like this isn't my story to tell, but
Mm,
at least I
yeah,
got the permissions to tell the story.
for
And
sure.
I spent a huge chunk of my time like talking about my positionality and why this project came to life and why it's
Yeah.
important to me. And the reception, Ben, like they gave me a standing ovation, and it was mind blowing because I thought I
Uh,
messed up, but it's so good for them. And
oh, that's great.
yeah, it was amazing to like to witness. And like I got consent from Miss Alma Clark and the girls. Like till this day, before the podcast, I told them like I'm coming on the podcast. I'm going to talk about you, and they're like, "Yeah, it's fine, it's cool, you
Sweet.
can do that." And Miss Alma Clark as well gave permission for the pictures and the videos. So
Lovely. Well, I can't
yeah,
wait to share those. Wondering, I mean, I know you're busy with a new job and and moving on your career, but I mean, you're still in the community and you're still in contact with these folks, which is awesome. And is there been anything? This just seems like something that should keep happening for more kids. Is anything like that happening at all, or have any other kids met with Alma? Or are you a BCBA supervisor looking to streamline your practice? Or maybe you're working towards your BCBA and need to find the right supervisor. Homehouse offers tools that make supervision so much more enjoyable for both supervisor and supervisee. For supervisors, they offer easy meeting documentation, competency tracking, monthly verification forms, a built-in supervision curriculum, and so much more. For supervisees, House has a fieldwork tracker with built-in auditing, monthly verification forms, a curriculum, quizzes, and more. If you're looking for a supervisor, they even have a supervision marketplace where you can connect with BCBAs until you find your perfect match, kind of like professional dating. For more information, go to whomhouse.com/speak or search House on Google. Zigzag is an autism therapy management platform. At its core, Zigzag seamlessly allows management of programs, adding, editing, changing long-term and short-term objectives on the go. Zigzag makes data collection super easy for therapists on site and automatically calculates progress, providing you with session summaries and graphs in real time. Zigzag provides you the ability to manage all of your clients, whether they be center or home-based, and work with all the various therapists and parents seamlessly. Zigzag is based in Vancouver, British Columbia, and is fully compliant with both federal and provincial privacy requirements. Book a demo now at www.zigzagkid.com/product demo and get a free 30-day trial. The third secret word is elder.
No other kids that I know of have met with Alma yet. But I do know that my hope was to continue this after graduation, but you know how graduation comes and like life just happens.
I get it.
And the hope will be maybe like during the summer, and I have to reach out to Shala because Dr. Shala is a busy woman that everyone wants a piece of her, but it would be cool to continue this. I know she also wants this to continue, and the plan was to for a different like graduate student to pick this up.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Yeah, for sure.
As well. So it's open like with that avenue and also with me going back. But
and I'd love to see Chevelle and Maliyha take this job over like in a few years. And
right.
You know, I mean,
right.
Wow.
Yeah.
So awesome.
I know. Amazing.
All right, people, you see why this is the coolest study ever. I mean, come on. Best ever, best story ever, best ending ever. Oh, so good. So good. And I haven't seen the videos yet, so I really want to see the videos. I'm pumped for that. Yeah, that's wicked. Yeah. You know, I don't know if this is the kind of thing that you're going to look to get published, but, you know, it doesn't matter. You know, I mean, it does matter because I think, you know, more of the world needs to see this, but I don't know. I don't think this needs to be published in a journal.
Yeah.
You know, I think
I don't know what journal would accept this. I don't think I had a fear, and I can't stress how amazing Charlotte is, like in protecting me, or protecting my passion. And I also want to state that as a graduate student working on this thesis, I had an experience that was very unusual and unique. I had a PhD student, April Linden, that Shala put on my team as well. So it was me and April working together, and then Shala as well. So I had that point of contact with April. April was there also to support me. April was present for my presentation at Baba, and she helps me like every step of the way. The kids love April. So Chevelle has a wonderful relationship with April. April is present in Southeast Denton and also MLK. And I had this unique encounter where I and April worked together. April helped me build the study. And before April, it was I and Dr. Pritchett Malika. And she helped me in gathering like the background, the history, working together. And none of my peers that I know of had that experience where like most of them even had an issue with finding time with their thesis advisor. Whereas with me, Shala made it possible for me to have like people to support me and to work together to bring this project to life. So Shala is amazing.
Yeah.
And April and Maliyha, everyone's amazing. Yeah.
Super shout out to Shala, April, and Maliyha. Super shout out.
Yeah.
Wow. Right on. It's a good way to end the week. It's awesome. Thanks for doing this work. Thanks for reading Maya Angelou, and just thanks for sharing some space with me to hear the story. This is awesome.
Thank you, Ben. Thank you for listening and for even reading our work and finding it valuable. Because this I'm not just I know my name is like the only author, but it was me, Chevelle, Maliyha, Maliyha, Miss Alma Clark, Shala, April. We all are a part of this project. Like we all worked, and Miss Shalon, obviously, we all worked hand in hand to bring this project to life. So it's not just me. So all of us, yeah.
Super cool. I'm glad you came on the podcast.
Thank you, Ben. Thank you for reading it and finding it
100%.
valuable.
Yeah,
Thank you.
so good. Cool. All right. We'll see you later.